got time. So, okay, so I've started recording and I'm going to turn it over to Len with the CSRD.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. I've got the first thing I'm going to go through is just my little presentation and introduction, just to give you guys that introductory component of it. Can you guys see my screen now?
You betcha.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this all started off about a year. It was last fall. We did myself and working with the Scotch Creek, Lee Creek Fire Department, we did a complete community assessment of Scotch Creek and Lee Creek. And part of that community assessment, we did an individual assessment on Caravans West. So I'll go through a couple of just high level aspects of the Fire Smart program and sort of my role and what I do, and then I'll dive into the specific report that we did on Caravans West. And I reached out to Krista, and then I was really excited to hear back, because I think for a number of reasons there's certainly some things we can do in Caravans West to not only reduce risk but of property loss, but also personal safety and those types of things as well. That makes sense? Perfect. Okay. All right. So my name is Len, and I'm the CSRD Fire Smart Coordinator. I'm also a certified Fire Smart Canada representative for our area. I'm a fire and life safety educator and a structural firefighter within the CSRD. And so my role is to educate residents on not only the CSRD Fire Smart program, but the risk that we face within the CSRD of property loss due to wildfire. And as I won't go through my full Fire Smart presentation, but the risk that we all face in the CSRD, and particularly Scotch Creek, Lee Creek, is quite high. And my overall job, though, is to help residents. So as an educator, I'll probably talk about some difficult items here, particularly as they relate to Caravans West. But my job is to educate, and it's not necessarily to tell you guys what you need to do or what you have to do, but it's to educate you on what we know with respect to wildfire behavior and property loss, and ultimately use the tragedies and the loss from previous events to try to make sure we don't experience that in the future. And as I said, each event, more and more as this evolves, it's truly the case. We learn more every time there is a loss, and if we have a loss or some sort of major event and we don't use that information, then that's a double tragedy, really. All right, so what we'll talk about here, as I said, is explain the threat of wildfire, and I'll get into that now, where in all the research that's been conducted, and most of the focus on education is on embers. So up to 90% of homes damaged or destroyed during the wildfire is a result of ember transport from the main fire. And so inside of 2 kilometers is our real sort of danger zone there. Inside of 2 kilometers, large embers can be transported, and not just one or 2 or 3 embers, but think ember storm, right? Think snow storm, sideways winds, but with embers instead of snow. And so if it doesn't take much to look around Scotch Creek, Lee Creek area to realize that we're reasonably surrounded by coniferous vegetation. We have rolling hills, south-facing aspects, and then even across the water is not that far from the other side of the lake. So potential exposure there. And then we'll go through the community assessment that we did for Caravans West, and it's quite comprehensive. But I'll just highlight a couple of the major hazards that we identified, and then when I identify hazards, of course, my hope is that I inspire you guys to understand what it is that we identify as hazards, and then look to work with us going forward to reduce your risk as a result of those hazards that we identified. And I'll say for Caravans West and for all communities in the CSRD, this is a free service. So this doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to do anything that we recommend, but certainly we'd love to work with you to have you implement some of our recommendations, and ideally have this as for you guys as a board and a community association to have wildfire and fire smart as a regular topic on your agenda item at least once a year. And then I'll talk a little bit about the CSRD Fire Smart program, although I did just speak a little bit about that, and that it is free for residents. So I'm gonna, before I get into this specific slide here, what I'm gonna do is switch over now to the Caravans West wildfire hazard assessment form. Can you guys see that screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you can see I've outlined Caravans West here, and this is the actual the Word document of the report that we completed. But I've outlined, and I noticed there's this little finger of Caravans West down. Is this correct? Down in
Correct.
down in
Yes.
here as well. Yeah. But if you take a look at this from an aerial perspective, coniferous vegetation on pretty much all aspects of Caravans West, right? And then even if we look in here, we have this little island of fuel, and then this island of fuel is connected through coniferous vegetation all throughout the community. And that's going to be one of our main focuses here in our conversation, is that let's just say there's a fire, human caused, lightning, whatever it might be in this area. We start to see some wind and ember transport land in and around and throughout the community, and the part that we've identified for Caravans West is it's a recreational community, and it's quite densely populated there, and so there's fairly significant risk that if one unit or one property catches on fire, that could quickly spread throughout the community, and my job is to help prevent that for you. Okay, so if we go down into sort of some of the specific ones, the roof cleanliness. So usually we start at the structure and then work our way down and then work our way out. And so we make some broad and general statements here, but in my observation, it was fall, and I think we had just had a reasonable windstorm. But about 80% of the structures had some level of needles on the roof, and then about half of the structures had fairly extensive needle coverage. And so think about that ember storm, right? That if we get embers thrown from either a fire in the community or somewhere outside of the community, and they land on those pine cones, pine needles, fir needles that's stacked up on top of roofs. Well, now we just have little bits of dried out kindling that then just start as little mini bonfires on everyone's roof. So roof cleanliness is a major factor in structure protection and the result of structural loss. And last year, the Mount Christie fire in Penticton, I'll just use as an example. I was one of the firefighters deployed down to that area, and throughout that whole wildfire, which was fairly significant in the community of Penticton, we lost one structure and one structure only, and it was a home with cedar shake roof. And so you just get a sense for when embers land on top of something, roofs are big targets, right? And when you have combustible items on the roof, or the roof is made of combustible materials, it doesn't take long before we see that fire spread. So roof and maintaining roof structure and roof cleanliness is an obligation, really. I see it, and a responsibility of every individual property owner in the community. And again, I'll send you this, Krista, just so you can
That,
fan it out. But I've just highlighted some of the major components here.
yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, we did name, label the area as an extreme risk. So I don't think, yeah, there's nothing in here that it's, I just stick to the facts. But the other, one of the other ones is so we think about nearby combustibles. So when we look at the structures themselves, what's around the structure? And in our observation, we noticed some fences, outbuildings. I have gold carts, but I see that should be golf carts. That's my great typing here. And other combustible items were around about 80% of the units. And I noticed about 40%, and I use round numbers here, right? So I didn't go and tick each individual one, but about 40% had firewood stacked outside, and more likely. And so whenever I see firewood, my head goes to, are they using that to heat inside, or is that a fire pit?
I'm just gonna stop you on that one, Len. I'm not sure why anybody would have firewood on their sites because there is no wood burning fires allowed on sites. We have 3 designated fire pit areas.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if maybe that was in the fall when they did some tree removal and
Maybe.
and there was just so you're aware that normally you wouldn't see wood being stored on a site.
That's wonderful. That's a big risk, because we look at that as people stack firewood outside of their home to cure it, right, to dry it, so that when they
Right.
do have a fire in a wood stove or in a campfire, that it's nice and dried out and it's cured and it's ready to burn. If embers land inside of that firewood is nice and dried out, it's cured, it's ready to burn, and it's stacked right up against the side of a unit.
Yeah, no, we do have a huge fire risk though there is a great big pile of dry old cured wood,
Yeah.
but it's not adjacent to, it's not on properties themselves.
Yeah, and so we recommend anything like that just be stored a minimum of 30 feet or 10 meters from any unit.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, so some other things, outside of, because when I go through a community, I look at it and say, if I was an ember in an ember storm, what is likely to catch up an ember? What's likely to stop that transport of ember in a community? And so I'm looking for those combustible items stored outside and around units. And I noticed about 80% would have had combustible items stored around the units.
Right.
But the big hazard here, and so the if I go back up to, yeah, so we'll stick to this one. So it's called, we have vegetation which is overstory. So think those big cedars and firs that are around your community. And then we have surface fuels and then ladder fuels. And so the big thing that we look at here is what's on the ground. So we'll start at the ground and work our way up. So if there's a bunch of pine needles, pine cones, those years and years of combustible debris that fall off of trees land on the ground, right? That just becomes flammable items. And then we have ladder fuels, and ladder fuels are either branches that hang down from those big trees very close to ground, or they are the cedar hedges, juniper bushes, and other items that are slightly up off the ground, but maybe connected to a unit, a deck, or a bigger tree. And then we have the overstory, or the larger coniferous trees, and when fire moves from the surface to ladder into the overstory, it obviously becomes a different fire to fight, right? So what we do is we try to stop anything from moving to the ground into the overstory, or if something is in the overstory, how do we protect individual properties and units around it? So when we look at the overstory, that we had that, like sort of close proximity of individual units, but also that coniferous vegetation. And we had, pretty much 100% of the units there were exposed to some level of overstory. And then the lower caravans, that little finger down below, there was about 70% overstory. And then in the latter fuels, these were quite extensive throughout the community, and so mostly this was, like I said, either branches hanging down, but there was quite a few cedar hedges, spread throughout the community, and that's sort of 80% ish that of the units that were exposed in some way. And so it doesn't mean 80% of the units have coniferous, have cedar plants directly on their property or on their lot. What I look at this is that if I have a cedar hedge on my property or my lot, is it still within that 10-meter zone of my neighboring lot or my neighboring property? And so not to suggest that 80% of them have cedar hedges, but when we look at it, it's that exposure to cedar hedges and ladder fuels. And I'll tell you, if you've read the Shoe Swap Kicker, the North Shoe Swap Kicker, I do an article there every month. Last month I picked on cedar hedges and juniper bushes. We call those green gas cans, and they have flammable oils inside of them. I would challenge you right now, wherever you are, if you have a cedar hedge, go outside, randomly pick a spot, open up that cedar hedge. It's nice and green on the outside, but it is brown and dead on the inside.
Yeah.
And then all of that dead stuff, easily ignitable, in addition to the green components of the cedar hedge that have those highly flammable oils. And so the cedar hedge and the juniper, not only are they incredibly flammable, but and with all of those oils burn so hot and so fast, but they're great little ember collectors, right? Think about a cedar hedge. You throw a ball into it, it's likely in some way to catch that ball, right? It just sinks in there, and all those little branches just hold it. So think about an ember flying through the air. That cedar hedge is just going to catch it, and with a little bit of wind fanned from a fire, it's probably really dry, low relative humidity, and that will lead to almost immediate ignition of a cedar hedge or a juniper bush. And so when I go through a community and I see lots of cedar hedges, lots of juniper hedges, it scares me. And so I know why people put these out, right? They're great for privacy. They're green all year long. They provide great ground cover. But I'll use the example of the 2016 fire in Fort McMurray. An incredible number of individual homes. And I actually have a video that I show in certain presentations in my longer ones, where embers got thrown into a pine bush and a juniper bush right below a home. And then a lot of people plant these, right below windows, and then the heat from that pops a window, and now we've got a great big wide open hole in the side of your home where embers can get in. But as that post event research happened in Fort McMurray, and really trying to figure out, why did this home burn down and why did that home not? And the news loves to call that a miracle home, right? And it's not a miracle, really. It's just that one had combustible items on or near it, and the other one didn't. And the unfortunate part is that if there's cedar hedges and junipers, that's highly combustible materials. But as we went through that post Fort McMurray event and talked to individual homeowners and said, well, this was likely the reason why your home was damaged or destroyed, 99% of them said, didn't know. We didn't know that. And so our mission really is to educate, right? To say, and then you go back to that person after that event and say, if you had have known that cedar hedge or the juniper was going to be the result of your home being destroyed, how attached would you be to it, right? And the answer after the fact is always really easy. I have lots of conversations with people every day in the field that say, "Well, I'm not cutting the cedar hedge down, and it's really important to me. It's private, and for whatever reason, I'm not going to do it." And I disagree with their decision, but I respect it. But if you talk to anybody after the fact who lost a home because of cedar hedging or junipers, the decision is probably post-event a little bit easier to swallow. So my job is to not to scare, not to spread fear. My job is to educate, and so I'd like to see no cedar or no junipers, 10 feet near any home or structure. In case. So as we move down into our community assessment, so you can see where we start to look at that, what we call priority zone 1, right, from 0 to 10 meters. Then we start looking out from 10 to 30. And you can see those little connected sort of pockets of trees where inside of that 10 to 30 meter zone, there's some overlap in there between the provincial park and then the property or the community that is to the west. And then priority zone 3, a little less important, but I look at this for what's the fuel load in the community, because 100 meters is still really close for amber transport. And then I look at topography and sort of, how many ways are in and out of the community, what's there for fire suppression. You guys actually have, I noticed there's hydrants in the area, swimming pool, really good water sources. But really in a major event, it's there's certainly a lot we can do to protect areas, but we oftentimes also don't have a lot of notice, right? It's great when we have 2, 3, 4 days of notice there's a fire in the area and we're under alert or notice, but sometimes these things can happen quite quickly and very close to homes and properties, and we don't always have time to respond as we would if we had a couple of days notice. But I'm just going to jump down to this one. So it's what's densely populated during the summer months. I'm guessing, right? Most people love being there. It's a great place, close to the water. Probably really, most people spend their time there in the summer, right?
Yeah, majority. Like
The majority, right?
It'll be busy.
Yeah, and that's wildfire season,
Yeah.
right? So high risk of human-caused fires. Not only, so I look at, what's the risk of lightning and other natural causes, but what's the risk if I'm outside maybe with some charcoal briquettes or something and I'm barbecuing and that tips over and hits a cedar bush, and what's the likelihood that that could spread throughout the community, and how quickly. And then I just, these are a couple of examples, right? So I took some pictures of, and this was the fall, but this is what I talk about overstory, right? So great privacy, right? Amazing privacy here in between these units, but if we look at that cedar hedge, just think about these pine needles and cedar, all the little surface fuels that have likely even blown up underneath this, and the cedar is likely throwing off its own stuff. An ember flies into this, catches the stuff on fire on the bottom of it. Well, this cedar bush catches on fire, and then it catches the stuff above it on fire. And then we have this, we lose this, we lose this, we lose this. So this is kind of what I look for when I go into a community. And I get this as this is a recreational community. I got the sense there was some people that lived there full time for sure, but certainly these are investments, and how terrible would it be if if you lost your recreational place or you lost the community. It's My job is to help, right? Help reduce the risk and educate, and if at the end of the day you guys say, hey, this privacy and these cedar bushes and the vegetation is really important to us, and we're willing to take that risk. Like I said, I might disagree with the decision, but I respect that it's yours to make. And what I can do though is educate and give you an opportunity to at least make informed decisions, right? Versus be uninformed to certain levels of risk. So I'm going to switch back to my presentation and finish up some of that stuff. So this goes back to my sort of the miracle home conversation, and this was a lab study that was done where um, home with non-combustible siding, gravel around it, um, built directly next to or attached to cedar siding, and then bark mulch, right? And with some holes and probably a little vent up here that had some sort of gap in it. Well, you can see this is inside a structure. This is actually a controlled environment where this was exposed to a simulated ember storm. So they just burned a bunch of stuff and threw high wind at it. And you can see that dark mulch, cedar down to ground, that caught on fire. The one with gravel around it, non-combustible siding, it didn't catch on fire. And so the thing I don't want anyone to take away from here is, oh my goodness, I have cedar siding, I'm screwed. That's not necessarily the case. If you have cedar siding, you definitely don't want to put bark mulch around your property. But if your cedar does come down to the ground, we can flash that with metal. There's lots of things that we can do to assist somebody with even combustible siding on their property. And the other little thing that I'm going to point up here is this little fire that's up in the corner, right? So somewhere up there, there was a vent, or there was a hole in the eave, the soffit, whatever it might be. And I can tell you from experience, these are like magnets for embers. They find them and they stick to them, and then they get fanned. And now all of a sudden we got a little fire in the roof. And we have a roof fire from a structural firefighter perspective. It's a completely different scenario once we have a fire in the roof. So we're defending other structures around it, particularly when you're fighting it from the outside and not on the inside. So just there's lots of things that we can do to protect homes in the wildland, urban interface, and it all starts with combustible items, on or near around these structures. And so how can we help? We're willing to, if everyone is interested, to come out, and we can walk around with every person who has a home, a lot, whatever it might be in Caravans West, and offer individual tips, suggestions, and information on how they can reduce their individual risk. We do have a rebate program that's available. So we can look at this as as a whole Caravans West thing. Whereas if you guys take some of um, our recommendations and implement them, there's a potential for us to provide rebates. But what I'd really like to do is when it's okay to travel and when people are able to travel between health authorities, um, is have me out, and I can do, even if we space out, you probably get the sense I can yell pretty loud, and I can reach a lot of people with my voice, and just if you're recording this, Krista, that's great. This can get sent out to people, but I'd like to walk around and just point out certain things, and then just really reach as many people as I can, because you guys have a great community there, right? That it'd be terrible to lose it.
Yeah.
And then what we've got is what's called a Fire Smart recognized community, and this does not mean that you are 100% fireproof, that no wildfire can ever take down your community or home. But all it says is that um, I do some level of education and presentation to whether it be the community association, bring you guys up to speed on the concepts and the aspects of Fire Smart, and educate the board, at a reasonably high level, right? And that's usually done over the course of a couple of presentations, so that you guys have a sense walking around with me and getting some of the other education and information on, your sleuthing eye now looks at the same thing that mine does. And then we meet between myself and you guys. We come up with a plan that says not next week, not necessarily next month, this year, but over the course of the next couple of years, we're going to look at reducing our overall risks and hazards. And so we'll identify what are those immediate ones that we can action right now. And even we organize a community day. We do these, we provide barbecues on us. We organize chippers, bins, and you guys, get the community interested in a cleanup day. But we invest a little bit of time in cleaning up some of those major hazards, and then we develop a plan. You guys, as a community association, chat about this every year, and we work with you ongoing every year to say, what are new hazards, what have you, done to reduce the risk, and then we get you guys as a Fire Smart recognized community. And I'd love to see that in your guys' area, because I think there's a great opportunity there to do that. And then the other thing is, we've got on the CSRD Fire Smart website, there's a ton of information, and so we've put together, this can be actually a really overwhelming topic, right? If somebody's looking at this and saying, where do I start? What do I do? You start looking around and going, there's cedar and there's bushes everywhere. It's too overwhelming. Where do I start? Well, that's what we do. We help with prioritizing. Here's the biggest hazards. The website has a lot of information. If you're not interested in having me out to do a community presentation, people are more DIYers. There's an enormous amount of info there that someone can consume and get more educated. And then really, my intent here today, with you guys, the community association, the board, is really just, number one, bring forward that here's the results of the community assessment that we did. Ideally, not scare you, but inspire you to be interested in working a bit more with us to reduce your risk. Understand that there's no obligation for you to do this, and there's no cost for you to do this. This is just us with a provincial grant, being in a position where we can assist people to make informed decisions on reducing their loss or damage due to wildfire. And so I put my contact information there. I'll send this to Krista. I'll send you a few more other resources that you guys can use, look at, explore. But if I can get you to take anything away is understand there is a fairly high risk in that area, but we want to help, right? And we can help. We have the resources and the capability to assist you. And really, all we need is the community association and a certain percentage of residents to say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We're interested in reducing our risk as well, and we're there to help you the whole way. So that's the end, Krista, of the sort of the formal presentation that I had. I was shooting for about half an hour. We're at 35 minutes here now. So not thoroughly like that whole sort of comprehensive Fire Smart view, but really just that assessment of Caravans West and just some teasers there on Fire Smart. So I'm more than happy to take any questions or what is what could be next steps? How many, what does this look like? What does that look like? Or is your guys?
So Shirley and Deborah, I had muted you guys just in case you didn't get any background. So if you want to unmute yourselves. But first, I'd like to say thank you, Len. As you know, I'm on the fire department out here, and last year was my first year, and we had an actual call to the provincial, and it scared me because it was really, really close to here. Do you ladies have any questions for Len? Deborah?
I do. First of all, thank you. That was very informative. And I have cedars that are 3 feet from my neighbors, and they all have mulch under them. So I am removing some now because they are so dead. So The one thing that I did want to ask about is, and you did allude to, we have a lot of trees in here. I have 7 in the front of my property alone. So is there more of a hazard between certain types of trees, or what do we do about all the trees other than taking them all down? Like,
That's right. That's a great question, Deborah. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, Fire Smart is just, chop down every tree," right? And that's not true. I live in this area as well because I love nature, I love trees, I love the surrounding hills, right? So you may have even seen in one of the, my kicker ads or where I say, not every tree is a risk to your home, but some are especially dangerous. And that's true. So if you have a number of trees around your home, there's things that we can do to, we either, some we should just outright remove. There's no question about it. They're
okay,
absolutely dangerous. The other ones, if let's just say we can't remove them, we treat the branches. So we never want a branch that's very close to your home that's below roof line. So, and I deal with this, and I'll use the example of a riparian zone, right? A lot of homes in Scotch Creek are near riparian zones. You're not able to take those trees down, but you are able to treat them. And same as if some trees are really expensive or dangerous to fall, you remove those branches to below roof because all the heat, right, is in that green flammable oils on those cedars and firs and spruces. So, and heat goes up. And so if we treat the branches that are below our roof line, then the heat's above our roof. If the branches are below the roof, then now we're exposing the side of the home and the soffit or that part of the roof to all of that heat. And then the second thing, or the third thing, sorry, is that if we do remove any trees, we recommend that they get replaced with deciduous. And so your maples, your oaks, anything that's leafy and that the leaves fall off. And I get that they're not green all year round and they don't provide as much privacy. But during the summer and in wildfire season, the deciduous trees are way safer than a coniferous. And so there's lots of options, whether they be cedar hedges for fire rated privacy panels. There's removing a cedar hedge and replacing it with a deciduous bush or hedge. And then for the trees that we can't remove, look to treat the branches to remove as much of that fuel as we can to the vulnerable parts of the home.
okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah, I've got some work to do here, just that I can do. The other thing, if I could ask too, so I'm on the west perimeter, and of course we have the other side by the park.
Yeah.
But there's trees along that line on the other side. Some are dead, and I do understand Caravans a few years ago went in there to try to cut down any trees within 3 feet of the fence. That owner has a huge, massive log pile of trees,
Yeah.
probably 10 years old, that's sitting there. So to me, that looks like a hazard. But what about those trees that their branches and everything are overhanging onto the pathway on the perimeter?
That's right. So
Would it help that if we cut all those down, because like the overhanging branches, we can't go in and cut the trees, but is that going to help at all?
yes. So I deal with this all the time in communities where let's just say it's more of an urban type community, right, where homes are closer together, or maybe there's a vacant lot like there is with you guys, and so my focus, what I say is control what you can, work on what you can control. The stuff that we can't control, if it is very close to our homes, it just means that we need to be extra diligent on our side of the fence to make sure that what we can't control doesn't, that we're leaving no opportunity for the factors that we can't control to impact our home. So what I would say, first and number one is if we, if the person that owns the property is to talk to them. And I would say the success on that sometimes is 50-50, right? Some property owners go, oh, yep, great. You know what? I'll do that. And others say, not interested, bugger off. But to your point, if the tree is on their property and your property line is here, you can take trees up. You can cut up from your property line straight up, right? It's called an aerial trespass is the word for it, really. But when you can't take the tree down because it's not on your property, but you can remove any branches that overhang your property.
Great. That's good to know.
So in terms of planning, I'm thinking of things like all of our common buildings that we all own have cedar siding. So I guess your recommendation would be moving forward when it's time to replace that we would replace with something like hardy board.
Yeah. So if that, I fully appreciate, renovations are not something that you get a Fire Smart presentation and you go, I'm going to go and change the siding in my house tomorrow. Right.
Right.
That doesn't happen. Right.
No.
Rare, very rare. So what I would say is that the answer to the question, yes, if you are looking at upgrading or changing siding as a result of a planned renovation in the future, absolutely, I would recommend non-combustible siding.
Yeah.
But if you do have that cedar siding, like I said, the concept, there's a few really important items in there. Number one is that if embers blow up against the side of the home, that if this cedar comes right down to the ground, we have up to a 15 centimeter flashing, where if that ember comes up against the side of it, it's not directly contacting wood.
Right.
That's number one important thing when you have a cedar siding or a wood siding home. And then the second thing is making sure that there's no gaps, no cracks, and no missing pieces of siding, no holes in the soffits, the eaves, the roof. And then you see them if you walk around a home closely enough. You see where a flicker is maybe poked a hole in the siding of something. Maybe there's an overlap on there's a big gap in a cedar shingle, or one's got completely taken off. It's minimizing anywhere an ember could get caught in there. And then the other thing I would say is that, let's just say you have a cedar siding home and a wooden deck, right? So now you have wood on the bottom, wood on the side. So we would look at, and I always say, like, use the example of take a barbecue briquette in a coal and put it up against the side of the home. Don't do this, but as an example, what would this look like? It's got wood on the side and wood on the bottom, right? So a little tougher to light the wood on the bottom, but as it's heating and cooking that wood that's on the side, it's more likely to ignite that vertical side. But we can certainly flash the side of the home and maybe that first couple of inches along the deck. But I would say, I'll throw my commercial out there, Shirley, to say that's what we do. When we come out to your home, we walk around with you and we say, we'd recommend this, we'd recommend that.
Yes.
And give you, all of those sort of unique and custom solutions to your individual property. That service is available to every person in Caravans West that wants it.
I just have a couple of questions for you. So when you mentioned about removing branches from the roof line, is there a recommendation on how high above the roof line there should be a clearance?
So the ultimate, there's a gold standard and then there's a reality, right? So the gold standard says no flammable vegetation inside of 30 feet of your home or structure. So in your community, that's not likely to happen.
No.
Right. So the further, above your roof line, below your roof line, bad. Above the roof line, better.
Right.
Further above the roof line, even better,
Right.
right? So yeah,
So as
ideally,
high as is reasonable.
that's right. Ideally, it's not there, but anything you can do to reduce fuels closer to the structure, the better.
Okay. And the second one I have is our illustrious membership decided to bring in 6-foot fences last year. So we are seeing people that are removing their cedar hedge, or there's some that are leaving the neighbor's cedar hedge and then they're butting their 6-foot fence right up against said cedar hedge. That's problematic. But what is your perspective on even just replacing the cedar hedge with a 6-foot wood fence? Like, should we be making a recommendation to not use wood fence?
So again, I'll talk the gold standard, and then you know, somewhere between where you are now and what you end up doing is likely reality, right? So again, the gold standard is you have, you know, no wood fence, no wood anything within 10 meters of the structure. Not likely to happen, right?
No.
But is a wood fence better than a cedar hedge? Absolutely. If you have that wood fence, so it's not directly on the ground, so there's a little bit of that if embers can't pile directly up against it, so you've got a gap where they can blow through, and if they hit it, they bounce down on the ground, and they're not contacting anything on the ground. That's better. And then the other thing is, don't have that fence come directly attached to the side of the structure, the home, a deck. Leave a little gap, right? Or a gap, where if that did catch on fire, it's not that direct line to your home, to your deck, to something else.
Yeah, I think any fence like would be 3 feet away from the closest structure, but it's still pretty close.
Yeah, I'm dealing with a strata in Blind Bay, and they're putting up privacy. They removed all their cedar hedging. They're putting up privacy fencing, but it's they're using like a fire rated resin type lattice and privacy fencing. So, you know, that I get when you're close to your neighbor, you don't necessarily want, you know, it's nice to have something there as a little bit of separation, right?
Right.
And so wood fencing is better than cedar hedges. Fire rated privacy fencing is better than wood fencing. But you know, you can kind of see where the reality is you're going to have something probably in between there. It's just try to select something that's the least hazardous.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of cedars that have been planted in here over the years, and I know my husband has been one of the ones that trucked thousands of them up from Chilliwack. So,
like I say, it's my job to you know, crush sales of cedar, juniper, and bark mulch at our you know, and I say that jokingly, but as long as it's 10 meters away from the home, it's you know, I completely understand you know, why people have them, but just right up against the home is a hazard.
well, and certainly in our setting, yeah, I get it. Like I say, I mean, it's impossible to be that far away from anything. So
It is, yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
well,
so that's where reality comes in, right?
mhm.
So there's a gold standard for fire smart, but then reality comes in to say, all right, we can't do this, but what can we do to minimize our risk?
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic, and I will definitely be sharing this with everyone. And then, yeah, I would certainly love to have you out. I guess it's just a matter of trying to coordinate, like say when they kind of give us a little better go ahead to have a bit of a gathering, or we just do it in some smaller groups. I'm not sure if like what your schedule would be like over the next month or so.
I'm pretty motivated to work with you guys there. So we can do, you know, evenings, weekends. I think here's what I'm hoping that happens is, let's just say after the long weekend here, we get some sort of guidance around when people are able to travel between health authorities. Because what I would like is obviously to reach the most amount of people there in the community. So if, let's just say, June 15th, everything opens up. I'd like to catch people sort of early into that, reopening of the cottage or the recreational property, because the first weekend people are generally, getting things set up, cleaning up, and so if we can, do that in sort of a coordinated way, where we give people, some things to look for, some hazards, and before everything sort of gets spread out, where maybe you can remove a few things first, and then just be cautious of what you are putting out there. And then the other thing that I do, Krista, is when we do these, community presentations, is that I talk about, okay, what if a wildfire is in the area, right? Maybe we have that 2 or 3 days notice. Well, that nice, comfortable, plush lawn furniture that everybody has on their deck, right? That's the reason we live where we live and have places where we live, so we can sit on our decks and enjoy our lives, right? But that nice, comfy lawn furniture is all synthetic material.
Right.
And so it's a wonderful ember collector, and it does not take much for that to burn. So,
Right.
so one of the things that I like to offer, and I'll provide, as part of the community program with you guys, is say, if there's a wildfire in the area, enjoy your life, right? Sit on your deck but now let's be extra diligent about what's going on around us. And so don't even go for groceries with leaving that stuff on the deck.
Right.
When we've got something happening, let's take that inside. Let's maybe tarp some of those combustible things that we've got around the property. But I hear all the time that, if a wildfire comes through the area, we're all screwed. There's nothing we can do. It's not true. And so, yeah, that's just one little example of things that if we do have something in the area, I can help, and I can increase your level of resiliency as well as preparedness.
Okay, well, I think what we'll try and plan for then is, we do try to have, except for last year with COVID, but we do try to have a couple of town hall meetings. So we could certainly have one very specific to this and just safety, just in general. We could tag on, our emergency response plan, or, just have a safety meeting, weekend kind of a deal.
Yeah. So
that's a good idea.
Generally, what we've planned is, let's just say it's a Saturday, and it doesn't mean you guys have to follow this agenda. But what generally happens is we call it a community cleanup day, or community day, and then so myself and others will come, do that sort of maybe 30-minute, half-hour overview of fire smart and wildfire risk. We've probably already met with the community association or the board to say, all right, here's some priorities, here's a few things, maybe here's common property, here's private property. What are some things that we can work on, so that we give people, a little bit of direction.
Right.
People go away for a couple of hours, maybe go and clean up some flammable items, reduce some hazards. In Quebec, we have a barbecue at noon. That's sponsored by us. So we provide that. And then, so it allows us to have that, sort of, again, that little walk around with people if they want it after the fact, but gives people a little direction as to, what to focus on in the morning. And then, yeah, in the afternoon or throughout that morning, if people put their hand up, there'll be 3 or 4 of us. We can walk around, we can look specifically at your place, do lots of ideas, tips, suggestions. And it's nice when I have little clusters of neighbors that are working together, because fire break, one place is a fire break, 2 places is a bigger fire break, 3 places is a bigger. So if you have a group of sort of 3 or 4 neighbors that are on the program, it's amazing how much that can actually stop the spread of a fire in a community. Where, because there's nothing for it to burn, your house doesn't catch on fire, then it stops there, right? It doesn't. My place catching on fire doesn't cause yours and yours and yours. So Yeah, I'd be really keen to work with you guys out there. I've dealt with Greg at your fire department, um, and I know through my conversations inside the district as well that there's a good level of motivation to work on the North Shoe Swap, and then of course we have the community wildfire resiliency plan that's happening on the North Shoe Swap this summer anyway,
Right.
and I'd love to work with you guys on it.
Hmm.
No, it sounds fantastic.
Can I ask just one quick question? Is it correct in my understanding that you mentioned about protecting the trees, like making them more resilient or spraying something on them?
We don't spray anything on them, but what we do is we reduce ladder fuel. So we get rid of. So if there's a fire on the ground, we try to minimize.
I
We
see.
put
Okay.
branches up about 2 meters, so that nothing on the ground can cause the tree above it to burn. Maybe if
Okay.
it's a really thick cluster of trees, we go in there and look at can we thin some branches? Can we thin some smaller trees
I
out?
see. Yeah.
Thin some dead ones. So we're reducing fuel and then making those trees that are going to remain in place that much more resilient.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think Len, you and I will stay in contact and just try to formulate a plan.
Yeah.
Like I say, wait till after this weekend and see if we get any relaxation on
See what happens.
what we can do.
Definitely. And I'll send you at the end of when we leave here, Krista, I'll send you, just some, we did a webinar. It's very similar to, I get into the concept of Fire Smart a bit more in the webinar, but I'll send you that link. It's 30 minutes. There's a Fire Smart 101 course. It's 30 minutes. It's just, there's lots of stuff out there. If anybody wants to dive into this topic a little bit more, and I would love it for the community association to be smarter than the average bear on this stuff. So it puts you guys in a position to answer questions. I'll of course remain a resource to you, but it just allows you guys, as you're having your conversations or approving certain, hey, so and so wants to put in a hedge. All right, not cedar.
Right.
Just gives you guys, put you guys in that position. But I'll send you a bunch of information that you can send out to everyone or not, or you guys can use yourself. But there's lots out there to educate yourself, and I'm going to be a resource to you.
That's fantastic.
Great.
Yeah. And like I said, we'll make sure to do the best that we can to help facilitate and to help educate and share the information with everybody.
Super.
All right.
Well, I really appreciate it. I just want to say thanks. It means a lot to me when communities have us out. It's great sharing the message, spreading the word, and to me it just shows engagement, and that gets me excited too. That makes me really motivated to work with you guys.
Excellent.
We'll look forward to meeting you in person, Len.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah. You got a great place out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We want to keep it.
We think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording on here and remember where to do it.
Okay. And